What drove me mad at first weren't the voices. It was realizing they knew my name before I even stepped inside the house. Before starting the report, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Write in the comments what time this video arrived for you. Now, enjoy your favorite horror session. For a long time, I was the kind of therapist who believed that someone else's chaos could be ordered with patience, active listening, and the right technique. I learned that early from my grandfather, a quiet but observant man who used to say, "No one drowns in silence, only in the noise they make to avoid it." I was raised around these beliefs. My mother used to say that some houses carry feelings, like people. I never took it seriously, until now. I was burned out. My sessions had begun to weigh too heavily. One of my patients, a quiet teenager with perpetually wet eyes, whispered something that made me shiver. Something he couldn't possibly know. Something I had never told anyone. Shortly after, I received a letter from the county clerk. An uncle I barely remembered had died, and as his last living relative, I inherited his property, an old mansion in upstate New York, surrounded by towering trees whose branches seemed to block out the sky. The idea of escaping the city, the patients, the voices, and my own memories felt almost like divine timing. So I went. The mansion welcomed me with an ancient silence, a silence that felt layered. There was something in the hallways, a kind of presence, not the feeling of being watched. Worse, the sense that someone knew I was trying to hide. The house was cold, not from the weather, but from a kind of mourning in the walls. At night, the silence twisted, and on the third night, I heard them for the first time, whispers coming from the guest bedroom walls. They didn't speak in full sentences, just fragments, words drifting like in a hypnosis session. "Don't tell him what she saw in the water. The staircase, it always breaks on the third time." That scream wasn't hers. I laughed, a dry, nearly desperate laugh. I figured it was exhaustion, or some unconscious escape from my own crisis. But the next day, while reviewing notes from a former patient who suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, I came across a phrase nearly identical to one of the whispers I'd heard in the wall. Coincidence? I wanted to believe so. But the following night, a new voice came, this time soft, feminine. "You feel guilt too, Elias, just like she did." No one knew my sister's name. No one knew about the accident. No one knew what I had done. In the basement, I found a door with 3 separate locks. It was made of thick iron with no external handle, like a cell or a vault. Something clearly not meant to be opened or closed again. The voices grew louder near that door, but I wasn't ready to ask why. The basement door never creaked. That was what bothered me most. Despite its rusted hinges and years of moisture, it remained silent, as if designed not to betray whoever opened it or whatever came out. 3 locks, all different. No keys, no signs of forced entry. I avoided the basement for days. I began leaving lights on throughout the house at night, a childlike way to keep the whispers away, though they no longer waited for the dark. They had learned to follow me into daylight, through cracks, through the pipes, through the vibrations in the walls, whispering my name. Elias, always with that dragging, mournful tone, as if they weren't trying to scare me, but confess something. It was around then that I started hearing more about my uncle. I searched through old papers locked in an upstairs room. I found medical records, but not his. They belonged to others. Different names, odd dates. Some pages bore only codes. Most were yellowed, stained with something that looked like rust, but deep down I knew it wasn't. There were notes about psychotic breaks, seizures, treatments with heavy lithium doses, and electroshock. And always at the bottom corner of every page, an unreadable signature. The same one over and over in faded black ink. And then, tucked between the papers, an envelope. Unaddressed, sealed with red wax. Inside, a newspaper clipping. Abandoned estate may have operated as a legal psychiatric facility in the 1960s. Investigation closed. The article was brief. It claimed there was insufficient evidence and that elderly neighbors had reported night screams, but figured it was just animals. The strangest thing, no one knew who owned the place back then, and now the house was mine. In the days that followed, I began keeping a journal, like I did for my patients. I wrote down every phrase I heard, every voice. I started hearing them more clearly. They had tones, emotions, nuances. Some screamed, others murmured with a sorrow that felt like it was pulling me inward. And the most disturbing thing, some of them said things only I could have known, secrets I had buried, even from myself. One night while rereading my notes, the power went out. I went to the kitchen to find candles. As I passed through the living room, I noticed something strange. All the picture frames were tilted, not fallen, just off-center, as if someone had walked past each one in a hurry, looked at them, and then lost interest. Then I noticed the portraits showed faces, but not my family's. Ordinary people with glassy eyes and half-closed mouths. I looked closer. The features, the names in pencil on the back of the frames, and a cold chill climbed up my spine. They were the names of my patients, but not current ones. Old cases. Some I barely remembered. People who had disappeared or stopped showing up. Some I later found out had taken their own lives. I'd always believed there was nothing more I could have done, that it came with the job, the burden of helplessness. But then I heard right beside my ear a voice I'll never forget. "You brought them here, Elias. All of them. Now listen." I didn't sleep that night. The next day I decided to open the basement door, not out of courage, but from a sense that if I didn't, the house would do it for me. It took hours to find tools that worked. The locks were fragile, as if they'd been waiting for me. Behind the door, a damp, narrow hallway stretched beneath the house. My flashlight barely lit the walls, which were covered in messages scratched in by fingernail. Whole sentences, names, dates. There was the smell of mold, but also something more acidic, chemical, or old blood. I found rooms, each like a cell. Inside were chairs with leather restraints, tables with rusted scalpels, empty vials of discontinued medications. And at the end of the corridor, a circular room with a mirror on the ceiling, cracked but still reflecting shards of who I once was. On the central wall, a phrase carved deep, "Words that don't heal, rot." And in that moment, I understood what the house wanted, not to drive me insane, but to make me listen. I felt them there, all of them, my former patients, the forgotten, the broken, the ones who left life with unfinished sentences. They were in the walls, in the bones of the house, in the words left unspoken, and behind me, in the dark, something breathed. It wasn't a whisper, it was a confession. The breathing was slow, uneven, heavy in the air, organic, too human to be imagined, yet missing something, a soul, as if someone was trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. I turned with my flashlight, ready to face whatever it was, but there was nothing. Only the echo of my hesitation, and still I kept hearing them. Not with my ears, but with my memory. The whispers were now voices, clear, as if they had waited years to be heard. "You left our words unfinished, Elias. You pretended not to see the signs. You talked so much and listened so little." I collapsed to my knees in that circular room, surrounded by stained walls and ghostly voices. They didn't hate me. It wasn't revenge I heard in them. It was abandonment, as if they had been buried alive inside me. And then I understood. The house wasn't haunted by spirits. It was made of unspoken words. Every brick a confession, every crack in the plaster a cry for help. This mansion, the one my uncle had left to me, wasn't an inheritance. It was a legacy of guilt, a sanctuary for the repressed, for the true therapists aren't allowed to admit. Sometimes listening fails. Sometimes we break with those we try to mend. I stayed there for hours, maybe days. Time lost meaning. I walked through the house like someone returning to a sick home. I opened doors I'd never noticed before, rooms hidden behind false bookshelves. I found my uncle's journals, pages scrawled in hurried handwriting, The paragraph's nonsensical, but filled with clear emotion. He wrote about the voice within the voices, the collective mind of the house, as if he were just a vessel. And finally he wrote, "We're not treating patients. We're feeding the house. Each session is an offering." That was when the question that had haunted me from the beginning finally took shape. Why did I inherit this house? Not because of blood. That was surface level. The house chose. It listened. It called to those who kept too many secrets. And I, failed therapist, guilty brother, man who fled his pain behind the mask of professional detachment, was the perfect vessel. My uncle hadn't left the house to me. He passed on the burden, because only someone like me could keep the structure alive. And then I realized the greatest truth. The voices knew about my patients because somehow the house listened through me. For years I had brought their traumas here. Every session, every story, every silent tear, it all entered me. And the house, in its silence, heard it through my memories. It absorbed, stored it. It was an extension of my subconscious. Or maybe I was an extension of it. What drove me mad at first wasn't the voices. It was knowing they existed before me and had been waiting. Maybe since childhood. Maybe since the first time I tried to silence what couldn't be said. On the final night, I returned to the circular room. I sat in the iron chair in the center. I brought with me the old tape recorder I found among my uncle's things. I pressed record, and for the first time I spoke, not as a therapist, but as a patient. I told them about my sister, about the lake, about the day she ran, slipped, and hit her head on a rock. How I stood still, didn't scream, didn't call for help, because I was a child, because I thought she was pretending, because by the time I realized, it was too late. I told them how my mother looked me in the eyes in the days after and never asked a thing, because she already knew. And how, years later, I chose a profession where I could mute the scream that never left me. When I finished, the recorder clicked off on its own. The voices stopped, not out of anger, but relief. For the first time, the house went silent. The next day, the basement door was locked again, on its own. I went upstairs, opened every window. Sunlight poured in. Dust danced, like in celebration. And I understood. The house didn't want to destroy me. It wanted me to hear what I had hidden for too long, and somehow, to release what others had left behind too. I left the mansion that morning. I didn't sell it, didn't burn it. It's still there, quiet, waiting for someone with too much to hide. Today I see patients again, in a small office. No windows, no pictures. But when a patient says something that reminds me of the house, sometimes, for just a second, I hear a faint whisper. "Are you listening properly this time, Elias?" And then I listen, for real. Are you enjoying the video? Leave your comment. Your support is very important to the channel. Now let's move on to the next report. No one told me silence could scream so loud before all this, before the paintings, the dreams, and the wounds. I believed pain was something that could be transformed. That's what my grandmother always said. She used to paint when my grandfather hit her. Said art was a filter, a dam. Better to let pain flow through the brush than through the eyes. My father thought that was weakness. I grew up hearing that men don't hide behind canvases. They face life as it is, raw, loud, and untamed. Then I married Clara. The divorce was a slow fire. There was no infidelity, just poorly chosen words and too much silence between arguments. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it judges. In the end, she left me with half a house, an empty studio, and the echo of everything we didn't say. I found the mansion on an obscure vacation rental site. The listing was simple: artistic residence available, secluded, historic, ideal for reflection. There was a photo, a stone facade covered in ivy, narrow windows like the suspicious eyes of someone who doesn't trust easily, furnished. The price was absurdly low. I didn't ask why. The first night was quiet. Not normal quiet. It was concentrated, heavy, as if the house distilled it, as if even the walls were waiting to see what I would do. It was on the second day that I noticed the paintings. Portraits in black wooden frames, hanging everywhere. Men, women, children, all elegantly dressed, maybe from centuries past. But each had one eerie thing in common. None had a mouth. Where there should have been lips, teeth, smiles, there was only smooth skin, like stretched wax. I tried to laugh. Thought it was just some eccentric choice by the previous owner. Later I found out his name, Ezra Montalvo, a collector, eccentric, reclusive, died 7 years ago, alone in the same house. On the third night, I had the first dream. I'm not sure it was a dream. It was dark, the kind of dark that hurts, and I felt hands on my face, fingers pulling at my lips, trying to erase them. And in the background, someone said, without sound, "You'll get used to it." I woke up sweating, with something warm on my pillow. Blood. There were small scratches around my mouth, like fingernail marks. I wanted to leave, but the next day the paintings had changed. One of them, the largest in the second-floor hallway, seemed to be looking directly at me, as if its eyes moved. I got closer. I swear I heard something, a faint rustling like paper crumpling. I put my ear to the frame, and I heard breathing. I decided to take it down, burn it, maybe. But when I returned with tools, the painting was no longer there. It was in my bedroom, same wall, same angle. Only now the subject's head was slightly tilted, as if he'd heard my thoughts. And that's when I noticed. The skin where the mouth should be was thinner, stretched, as if something underneath was trying to move. That night, I placed a chair against the door and slept with the lights on. And I dreamed again. This time there were others, a line of faceless figures walking toward an altar. Above it, an inscription carved in stone. Pain speaks, silence frees. I woke with a sharp ache in my jaw, more cuts, deeper. I thought of running, but something held me, a sensation I can't describe, as if the house was about to tell me something, as if I had started a painting, and now I needed to finish it. The feeling was clear and sharp. I couldn't leave. Not yet. It wasn't fear. It was incompleteness, like ripping a canvas in half and knowing you have to start it again from scratch. The house had asked me a question, and each night came with a crooked answer, whispered between dreams and flesh. Maybe I was going mad, or maybe I was finally listening. The next morning, I went to the mansion's library, a vaulted room with towering shelves that looked like living walls. Amidst books on art, philosophy, and macabre curiosities, I found a diary, leather-bound, worn by time. No title. On the first page, neat handwriting, Ezra Montalvo. Memories beyond the voice. My heart skipped. In the pages that followed, he wrote, with almost feverish excitement, about his discoveries. Ezra believed all human pain was a reaction to sound. That trauma was born from cursed words, truths told too late, screams stuck in the throat. He saw sound as an evolutionary mistake. He wrote about a group, the Fraternity of the Void, a circle of thinkers, artists, mystics who preached the eradication of spoken language. One passage chilled me. We learned that by silencing the mouth, we free the mind from the weight of narrative. In absolute silence, not the absence of sound, but true silence, lies what we call the white state. There is no memory, no pain, only pure existence. It was a cult of silence. At the end of the diary was a strange note, like it had been written in trance. The portraits are portals. Their mouths weren't erased, they were sealed. Anyone who enters this house, if they listen closely, can hear them whispering from where no one speaks. They don't want to leave, they want company. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the diary on my chest, staring at the ceiling. Around 3 a.m., I heard the first real sound since arriving. 3 knocks on my bedroom door. Not loud, not impatient, just 3 polite knocks. I got up slowly. The chair was still pressed against the door. I peeked through the peephole. Nothing. But when I removed the chair and opened the door, one of the portraits was there, on the floor, leaning gently against the wall, as if placed there with care. I couldn't tell which one. The face, more relaxed now, as if smiling inwardly, looked vaguely familiar, but it couldn't be. I'd never seen that person before, and yet the eyes spoke something. They invited me. I went back inside and closed the door. I slept, and I dreamed of Clara. She stood in that same hallway of portraits, her face blurred, not faceless, but as if someone had brushed solvent across her features. When I tried to speak, my voice came out distorted, like shouting underwater. She turned to me, placed her fingers on her lips, and mouthed soundlessly, "If you loved me, you would have understood by now." I woke with unbearable pain in my jaw. I ran to the bathroom. In the harsh light of the mirror, I saw the cuts had deepened, but that wasn't all. My cheeks were slightly swollen, as if something or someone had tried to pry my mouth open, then sealed it shut in a hurry. I spent the entire day avoiding the portraits. I locked the doors, covered the mirrors, but every time I looked at a wall, it felt like they were watching from somewhere, and the paintings kept moving, changing locations, reappearing where they shouldn't. I started noticing something else. The windows no longer open. Neither did the exterior doors. No lock seemed to work the same way. It was as if the house breathed, as if it knew I was close to understanding something and held me just a little longer. That's when I began to hear, not with my ears, some inside my head. Soundless voices, like whispers behind veils of flesh. They came from the frames, from inside the paintings. I returned to the library, examined each portrait in detail. That's when I found the second diary, hidden behind a false panel. In it, Ezra described his final weeks before dying. He wrote of nighttime visitors, figures sitting at the edge of his bed, of a final ritual, which he never fully explained, only hinted at. The mouth is the final frontier. When it goes silent, inside and out, the world reveals itself, quiet, eternal, without pain. I'm ready for the final step. If you're reading this, it's because the house chose you. It doesn't open for just anyone. On the last page, one phrase scribbled over and over, like a mantra: don't speak, don't resist, don't fear. After that, something broke in me. I went to the portrait in the hallway, the first one I'd seen, stared into its eyes for minutes, and finally, it blinked. I'm not lying. The portrait blinked, just once. Then I felt something different, a release, as if, for 1 second, everything made sense, as if Clara had been a necessary mistake, as if I was closer to a truth others would never touch. It's hard to explain, but in that moment I realized I might never leave, and deep down, part of me no longer wanted to, because for the first time since all this began, even before the divorce, I was at peace, silent, uncomfortable, terrifying peace. Ever since Ezra blinked at me, or his portrait did, something changed. Not just in the house, in me. The whispers were clearer now, not just shapeless sounds. They had rhythm, intention, tongueless voices trying to speak the unspeakable. Sometimes while I painted, as if guiding my strokes. Sometimes while I ate, which became rare, whispering, "You're still bound to the noise," as if chewing was an offense to the cult that now surrounded me from every wall. And the wounds, they didn't hurt anymore. A thin line had formed from my lower lip to my chin, like a stitched smile. Every morning, a new precise, symmetrical cut appeared. The skin around it was hardening, like old wax. I looked in the mirror and saw another man, less expressive, calmer, like the portraits. Deep down I knew I was becoming one of them. But the strange part, it no longer terrified me. It fascinated me. One day while walking through the halls, now familiar, as if among silent colleagues, I saw something new. A smaller frame, no image, just a black void like a dark mirror. And there, for the first time, I saw my own reflection. But my mouth was gone. The skin was intact, smooth. No lips, no teeth, no opening. And for a moment, I didn't panic. I felt peace. The kind of peace you feel at the bottom of a lake, when everything is weight and pressure, and the world above feels far away. But when I blinked, my reflection didn't. That's when I realized the painting didn't show who I was. It showed what I was becoming. That was a warning, a thread of clarity pulled by the memory of something long forgotten, something spoken, not dreamed. Clara. I remembered the last thing she told me in the real world, before the divorce, before the mansion, before everything fell apart. You hide in everything you create. One day you'll be nothing but the shadows you paint. I laughed at the time, thought it was dramatic. Now I saw it was prophecy. I was only shadow, dissolving into silence. I grabbed my things, decided to leave. But the doors no longer existed. Where there had been entrances, there were now smooth walls, as if the house was erasing the lines of architecture like it erased the mouse in the portraits. In desperation, I ran back to the library. I combed through the diaries, searched for loopholes, escapes, rituals that could undo what Ezra had started. And I found a single torn page, hidden in a book on human anatomy. On it, only one sentence. The only way out is to remember who you were before you listened. The memory hit like a punch. The boy who watched his grandmother paint to forget pain. The young man who believed art was a disguised scream. The man who used painting to say what he couldn't speak. My voice had always been in my hands. I ran to the mansion studio. My canvases were still there, white like empty eyes. I grabbed brushes, paints, and began to paint. Not elegant portraits, not faceless silence. I painted memories. Clara laughing, all teeth visible. My grandmother, fingers stained with paint. My own face as it once was, imperfect, loud, human. As I painted, the house trembled. The walls shook. The portraits, all of them, began to drip. Their mouths returned, one by one, opened in silent screams. It was as if the house itself was in pain, as if the voices were being forcibly freed. The mansion wept. Light flooded the ceiling. The windows cracked. And then, silence. Not the old kind, not the choking silence. The other kind, the real one. The silence after the scream. I awoke from what I can only call a trance. I was outside in the garden. The trees swayed. The sun was rising. The mansion stood behind me, but it seemed smaller, less alive. In my mouth, I still tasted dried blood. On my chin, the scars remained. But my mouth was intact. I spoke aloud. Clara! My voice was hoarse, weak, but it came out. I was back. Months later, I still paint. I've told no one this story. How could I? But sometimes, late at night, I hear a whisper behind the unfinished canvas in my studio. Not words, just a presence. As if someone on the other side of the paint is waiting for me to paint again. But I don't paint silence anymore, or shadows. Now I paint sound, because I know what happens when we stop hearing ourselves, and I never want to forget my voice again. Let's move on to the next report. But first, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. If a house can dream, then the Elberth mansion dreams of our pain. I was always the skeptic in the group, the one who laughed during recordings when someone claimed they heard whispers or picked up a strange electromagnetic field. That's just how I was raised, feet on the ground. My parents used to say our ghosts were just stories to make kids go to bed early, but my grandfather had a different idea. He used to say the same thing every night before bed. It's not what you see that gets you, it's what you feel. Back then, I thought it was just one of his old man ramblings. Now, I'm not so sure. We got popular on YouTube by chasing things that allegedly don't exist. Slick editing, exaggerated jump scares, guaranteed views. But the offer we got that time felt different. An anonymous email, a link with the blueprint of a house, and a single line at the end of the message, "You won't come out the same." Elberth Mansion. Built in the late 1800s, abandoned since the 1970s, and wrapped in a disturbing history. Everyone who tried to live there disappeared. The police always chalked it up to runaways, suicides, even strange cults. But the town whispered something else. They said the house swallowed anyone who dared sleep in its rooms, that there were no bodies because the mansion fed on them. We arrived at dusk, me, Julia, our self-proclaimed medium, Marcus, the sound tech, and Kyle. who handled the camera like it was part of his body. We spent the day setting up gear, mapping floors, nervously laughing. Just another shoot, we told ourselves. Nothing new until we found the door. It was at the end of the third hallway on the upper floor, the number stenciled in red, 313. Strange, because the blueprint showed no more than 200 rooms. And yet, there it was, locked, no handle, as if it had been sealed from the inside, not just out of place, but none of us remembered seeing it during our initial walkthrough. Julia turned pale, said she felt something inside, something old, something hungry. Night fell like a heavy blanket. We began formal filming, jokes, temperature readings, motion sensors, the usual. But in every shot, in every frame, door 313 loomed in the background, and Kyle, without noticing, kept being drawn to it. I caught him aiming the camera at it over and over. Then around 2 a.m., he whispered something I still can't unhear. The door's open now. We ran to the hallway. It was true. 313 was ajar. A cold wind seeped from the gap like the air itself was being sucked inward. Julia refused to go near it, said something had come out when it opened, but didn't say what. Kyle was already stepping inside with the camera. That's when I heard my mom. Not a sound like her voice, not a recording. Her, on the other side of the door, whispering my name the way only she did when I was a kid. But my mom died 6 years ago. The lights flickered, the air grew thick, and the house breathed. The walls groaned, not with the creak of old wood, but as if they had ribs, as if every brick held a lung suffocating beneath layers of time and darkness. Kyle stepped across the threshold of room 313 without hesitation. The rest of us froze. His flashlight cast trembling shadows on the inner walls, which seemed different. The wood wasn't rotted like the rest of the mansion. It was new, almost alive, and stranger still, no dust, as if someone had just cleaned. Or maybe, as if the room had been used, recently, still warm. Mom? The word slipped from my mouth before I realized. Julia turned to me, eyes wide. You heard it too? She whispered. That voice, that suffocatingly warm presence. My mom had died of an aneurysm in her sleep. I remember the phone call. I remember screaming and shattering a glass in my hand. I remember the crushing silence after. But now, she was calling me from room 313, as if time had never moved on. And then the door closed. Kyle was inside. We ran to it, shoved, kicked, screamed his name. Nothing. Silence. Julia pressed her ear to the wood and turned pale. He's talking to someone, she murmured, and he's laughing, but it's not happy. We stood there for minutes, maybe hours. Marcus hit the door with his flashlight. No use. Then suddenly it creaked open by itself, like it had never been locked. Kyle was sitting in the middle of the room, smiling. The camera lay at his feet. His eyes were wide, staring at nothing. And he repeated over and over, I saw her. She loves me. She loves me. She never left me. We tried to pull him out, but he resisted, said we couldn't separate him from his mother, that she forgave him, that everything was okay now. Kyle was the first. It took hours to coax him out of the room, but even then, something came out with him. Later that night, reviewing the camera footage, we saw something that froze us. In the corner of the room, barely lit, stood a figure, feminine, faceless, wearing the same mother-of-pearl necklace Kyle's mom used to wear. That's when the rot began. And I don't mean the house. Marcus started withdrawing, muttered to himself, stared at blank walls. Just the day before, he was skeptic number 2. Now he mumbled about confession, said his father was watching him from the dark, that the mansion knew. Julia tried to hold it together, said room 313 wasn't just a place, it was a wound in the house, a spot where reality thinned, where something old waited for emotional cracks. The house doesn't want bodies, she said. It wants feelings, unresolved love, unfinished grief. That's what it feeds on. I wanted not to believe, but then I saw my grandfather in the kitchen, 3 a.m. cooking eggs, just like he did when I stayed over as a kid. He looked younger, his eyes bright. "Stay a little longer," he said, like he'd never died in that hospital bed. "The house will take care of you." I ran, locked myself in the bathroom, slumped against the old porcelain tub, shaking. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see my reflection. I saw my mother's face, but it wasn't her. The eyes were hollow, hungry. The next morning, Marcus was gone. Only his clothes remained, folded neatly on the couch. A note on top. "I was forgiven. Don't look for me." Time warped. Julia said we'd been there 2 days. My camera said 5. And at night, room 313 breathed. Its frame swelled and shrank like lungs. And always, always, voices echoed from inside. Different voices for each of us. I tried to confront Julia, demand we leave. But she was changing too, talking to nothing, reaching into the air like she was holding invisible hands, said the house was showing her truth. And then finally she walked into room 313. I followed. Inside, the air was feverish. Julia was crying, hugging something I couldn't see, whispering the name of a dead brother she'd never mentioned. And behind her, shadows shifted, forming faces, kind, familiar, twisted, bent in ways nature never intended. "Why is this happening?" I asked the darkness, barely choking back panic. And a voice, calm, low, made from every person I ever loved, answered, "Because you opened the door." It echoed inside me, inside room 313, a whisper that roared through my thoughts. "Because you opened the door." I didn't need to look around to understand. The mansion wasn't just an abandoned structure anymore. It was a living creature, a beast, feeding on who we were, our fears, losses, invisible bonds. And that door was its mouth. I shook, trying to back away, but my legs were stuck in invisible cement. Julia was still kneeling, hugging nothing, and whispered, "It feeds on what we love most." When we opened 313, we let it in. It took our memories, our feelings, and now it becomes them, to lure us, trap us. A shape formed behind her, her brother's shadow, the same I'd seen in the footage. This time he spoke with the voice of childhood. "Come, Julia, don't be afraid." She turned, eyes wet, a soft smile. "I love you. I always have." Then the shadow vanished, but Julia didn't move. The room pulled her into the darkness. I tried to reach her, but something slammed me back. That's when I understood. The house doesn't want to destroy, it wants to keep, to preserve the pieces it feeds on. And those pieces are the people we love most. I was alone now. Marcus, Kyle, Julia, all trapped in twisted versions of those they couldn't or wouldn't let go. Loved ones, resurrected by the mansion to keep their souls tethered. My heart broke. I couldn't let that happen to me. I wouldn't. That's when I saw her, the final figure, my mother, the real one. Not the spectral, hungry one from before, but her, smiling, warm like my childhood. She reached out for a hug. "Come," she said gently, almost human. For a second, I nearly gave in. Let the pain end. Let the warmth take me. But I remembered my grandfather's words. It's not what you see that gets you, it's what you feel. And I felt the hollowness behind her smile, the absence of life, the endless hunger of that house. I couldn't give my soul to a lie. So I screamed, not from fear, but defiance, rage, refusal. "This isn't real," I shouted, trying to break free. The house answered. Walls trembled. The floor moaned. The figure of my mom disintegrated into shadows. Room 313 began to close. The light faded like the world was being turned off. I ran, down hallways that stretched into forever. The mansion fought to hold me, to pull me back into its starving embrace, but I wouldn't let it. At the last second, before the dark swallowed everything, I saw sunlight, spilling through the front door I had forgotten to lock. I stumbled out, choking, eyes burning with tears and the smoke of dying memories. Outside, the town was calm, unaware of the nightmare inside those walls. Since that day, our group is broken. We never heard from Marcus, Kyle, or Julia again. I left ghost hunting behind because I know now some doors should never be opened. Some stories should never be told. But the question that still haunts me, that wakes me up at night, is this. What does the Elberth mansion really want? Now I know. It doesn't want souls. It wants love. It craves the invisible thread that ties us to those we've lost. It doesn't swallow bodies. It consumes our deepest emotions. It feeds on the emptiness we try to fill. The love left unspoken, the forgiveness never given, the grief that refuses to end. And when you open door 313, you also open that wound, giving it the power to shape a world where those emotions feel real until you lose yourself in it. I made it out alive, but the mansion still got me. Because now wherever I go, I hear my mother's voice calling. And I know if I ever give in, she'll pull me back into the room that never truly closes. Room 313. Some stories never have clear answers, and that's perhaps what scares us the most. To hear more stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and get ready for the next story.